get into it.
And when Christians who lived through it call it out and explain how wrong it is, that I read a research paper this week that was fascinating. It basically shines a light on the harm that purity culture.
All right, so this guy says that purity culture is absolutely failing and is causing so many people after they get married to have a terrible sex life and so much more. And I think he is completely wrong on so many levels. So let's get right into it. This is called This video is by Friendly Atheist. So let's get right into it.
But this research paper actually looked at the consequences of purity culture on women after they get married. And that's what I found fascinating because I have not seen anyone go into depth about this. So this paper looked at women who were raised in purity environments. They believed wholeheartedly that they had to remain pure for their husbands until they got married. And then they were supposed to willingly submit to those husbands after they got married, after the wedding. And yet, their sex lives rarely focused on their own pleasure, the women's pleasure, because why would it? And in many ways, purity culture actually forced them to downplay any abuse they suffered within the marriage. This is the big takeaway from the paper, and I want to talk about what's going on. And that requires me to explain to you just how damaging purity culture can be. Okay, and for the sake of this paper, they only talked about white American women because when you add race into this, it complicates the picture. So we're going to try to keep it simple. But basically, I think if you don't know purity culture, you may be shocked at how abstinence is actually taught to so many millions of young Americans in their churches, sometimes at their public schools, a lot of times at their religious schools. And this is what they tell a lot of girls. For example, what does purity culture say? Sometimes girls are told that their virginity is like gum, and that if you do anything sexual, well, that gum is being chewed up. And at that point, what do you have to offer your husband eventually? It's just going to be this chewed up gum that nobody wants. That's what they are taught. Another example, I've heard of this anecdote that let's say you're in a class of 30 kids, they give the first kid a cup and they say, spit in it. And then that cup is passed along to the next kid who has to spit in it. And they do that and they circle around the room. And the last kid in the room, they say, do you want to drink from this cup? Kid's like, ew, no. Why? And the answer is because if you have sex with other people, that's what it's like when your husband has sex with you. It's disgusting because other people have been with you. No one will want to drink that, is the implication. Another example they have used is like Scotch tape or something, and they put it on your arm and they rip it off. And what happens when you take tape and you keep ripping it off your arm? At some point, that tape becomes useless. It's not sticky anymore. And that's what you're like if you do anything sexual. And one more is that you're like a rose, but everyone takes off one rose petal until all that's left is the thorns. And every time you do anything sexual, it's like ripping a petal off of your body until only the crap remains. So this is the message.
Okay, friendly atheist. I would say that I grew up essentially in the purity culture. I grew up essentially with all of my parents, especially my mom, really leading this type of idea. So I know firsthand what it's like to grow up in a purity culture, essentially. But I've never been taught any of those ideas, essentially, or those illustrations, at least from what I remember. And at the end of the day, though, you need to realize if a girl has sex with, let's just say, for the 10 with 10 people, they're not going to be as attractive to a guy who has never had sex with anyone before. It goes both ways. That's the problem, what he's thinking. I'm sorry, that's just how it works. And it's not about, oh, you're disgusting or whatever. It's just how it works with guys. What are they going to find more attractive? When you have sex with multiple partners, do you, especially like a lot, you're going to have to face the consequences. That's just how it is. But it's not obviously like something, ew, disgusting, gross. But that's what he thinks that, I get it. Maybe that illustration is a little too far. Maybe it is. But there are a lot of consequences to going and sleeping around with multiple partners before the person that you marry and want to spend the rest of your life with. So let's continue.
The conservative Christians send to young women. And imagine the impact that has for, first of all, any kid who has any sort of sexual feelings whatsoever, which is a normal thing. What happens if kids, young women, have been physically assaulted? Where is that exception in the rules? It doesn't exist. So suppose
That's
you are the
not true.
victim of sexual violence.
There's so many reasons to, or Christianity has so many thoughts on how to deal with people who have been sexually assaulted. There's a big difference than choosing to do it and then being forced to do it.
Well, guess what? Your church just told you you are now worthless to your future husband. What happens if you're a young person and you just want to explore with someone you genuinely like? Well, your church is teaching you your future spouses are going to hate you for it. That's why that stuff is so damning. Here's another example. I'm going to show you a clip from a sermon. This is from a guy named Chris Valentine. And about a couple years ago, this is a guy who is a leader at Bethel Church in California. Google that one. It's crazy. But basically in 2021, he re-uploaded one of his old sermons, and it caused a big kerfuffle because he says a lot of damning stuff in it. I'm going to play the clip for you, and then we will talk about this clip. But this is a guy who is promoting purity culture.
And girls, I'm just going to say this to you. Guys are stimulated sexually through the eyes, women through the touch. You're like, not me, whatever, you're a freak. So I'm saying, listen, if it's not for sale, girls, don't advertise. Okay? So, if you're doing this, I just want to say, you know what? If you fish with shark bait, you're going to catch sharks. And if you caught them because of your big boobs or your big butt, remember there's always someone with a better body than yours. And if that's the kind of guy you caught, I don't know how you're going to keep him. There wasn't a dry eye in that place, and that young man.
Okay. You have to admit, friend the atheist, that he's right about if someone is just trying to be with you because of your looks are going to fade. Your looks are not going to be the same. There's always going to be someone who technically might look better than them. And that is dangerous. You have to admit that. But if you start this and have a firm foundation on maybe personality or your religion or things that you have in common, especially when you both follow Jesus, you're going to have a much more firm foundation and be able to last a lot longer in your marriage. He's right about that.
Said, why didn't anyone effing tell me this? The girl in the front row she was sitting on the bench, who was my most promiscuous girl, there. She was letting everybody grab her on the basketball court and thought it was funny.
Yikes.
She said, nobody ever told me this. They were talking about the fact that they had something that they were to fight for. And I want to tell you that I believe, and I've seen thousands, at this point, thousands. I wrote a book called Moral Revolutions. I've seen thousands of people's virginity restored. I have hundreds of emails about girls' hymens being restored. Hundreds. Yeah, it's not typically something you tell your pastor. By the way, I had a creative miracle. Really? Awesome. What happened? God restored my hymen.
That's kind of
Most
sus.
people have no clue
Okay.
that in 2024, the best way to make money with Amazon is not with physical.
I agree with that. That's kind of like, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but physically, there's consequences, and there's a problem with that. I'll agree. Hello, I only have a few minutes. Just wanted to say hello, Mr. Split. Oh, sad you have to leave. I have to admit though, that is kind of weird. I've never heard that before. I don't definitely agree with everything Bethel says. So that's the problem. He's attacking just and nitpicking every small little thing from like every corner of religion and then putting them all together and saying that's what all Christianity is like. Hopefully there was no picture evidence. I agree. I think spiritually you could be like, yeah, God is restoring me. God loves me, and that's okay. But okay, I'm sorry if you've had sex already. You're not a virgin anymore. You're not a virgin anymore, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have consequences when it comes to being in a relationship. Okay?
Yeah, so that guy exists. Sexist tropes, victim blaming, bad science. He's like, all guys are stimulated through the eyes, women through the touch. Anyone who disagrees is a freak. That is not how it works.
He's obviously joking, buddy. Come on. But also, in a generality, yes, most guys are stimulated by the eyes and the mind. And women are more from touch, emotions, and that seems to be true. Obviously, just based off of me and my wife, but wishful thinking, false advertisement.
The crowd, if it's not for sale, girls don't advertise, but there's no analog for the guys. Guys can apparently wear whatever they want. He referred to a girl who attended one of his ministry programs as his most promiscuous girl, which is a weird description for a man to make about a child.
That's funny.
And then he said, I've seen thousands of people's virginity restored. I have hundreds of emails about girls' hymens being restored. Oh my God, someone check this man's inbox. That's not what happens. That's not how it works. What the hell? But this is an example that they actually cited in the research paper as indicative of just how awful purity culture is. The paper actually included a couple other examples I had not seen before. One example, I was shocked to read this. This is from 1975. It's from Dr. James Dobson, one of the Focus on the Family founder, guy who wrote books that a lot of Christian parents used to raise their kids. He wrote a book in 75 called What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. And oh my God, I want to show this to you. He said that when men are not getting sex, their semen literally builds up inside them to the point where their bodies need a release. And I'm quoting here, if she loves him, she will seek to satisfy those needs as meaningfully and as regularly as possible. I swear this is the thing. Look at this. When sexual response is blocked, males experience an accumulating physiological pressure which demands release. I'm not reading all of this biology here, but a wife may find it difficult to comprehend this accumulating aspect of her husband's sexual appetite, since her needs are typically less urgent. And
that's why I said emotional, like physical. They need to feel, a big part is security, obviously. But one thing that this guy is missing, though, and like, in my opinion, for like actually in Christianity, it's supposed to be both ways. Obviously, it's not just about women. It's about men who need to fulfill the women's desires and needs as well. It goes both ways. I don't get where he's thinking that, oh, just because you're a Christian, it's only about the women fulfilling the man's needs. That's just not true.
Pressing. Interesting bit of self-admission there, I feel. Thus, she should recognize that his desire is dictated by definite biochemical forces within his body. And if she loves him, she will seek to satisfy those needs as meaningfully and as regularly as possible. What about women's needs? I'm not denying that women have definite sexual needs which seek gratification. Rather, we could stop there. This guy, what does he say at the end? I'm merely explaining that abstinence is usually more difficult for men to tolerate. Yeah, women have no sexual needs, just the guy. And ladies, come on, you can't let it build up. You gotta let him release. Oh my God. By the way, that rule of the biology of the men, it builds up after.
Yeah, I'm curious, is Friendly Atheist married? Does he have a partner? What's his sexual appetite? When God seen Adam was alone in the garden, it created Eve to make him a sandwich. Wow. That's what Muppet said. No, I think this guy's just completely taking a little side of actually what it means to be pure. And saying, oh my goodness, it's so misogynistic. Oh my goodness, men, it's all for men. And that's why they wrote all these books to give the men control and power. But what they don't realize is what Christianity teaches to, yes, it says, wives submit to your husbands. But then it says, men, lay down your life just as Jesus laid down his life. So essentially, men, you have to essentially sacrifice yourself for your wife. So who's really giving up more?
That's not science. That's a myth. I don't know how else to say that to you. Here's another one that I learned from this paper that I had not seen before. This is from 2002. There was a guy named Kevin Leman who wrote a book, I guess, called Sheet Music: Uncovering the Secrets of Sexual Intimacy in Marriage. And he basically told Christian wives they have to have sex with their husbands even when you don't want to, because that's how love works. And this is from his book. This means there may be times when you have sex out of mercy, obligation, or commitment, and without any real desire. Yes, it may feel forced. It might feel planned. And you may fight to stop yourself from just shoving your partner away and saying enough already. But the root issue is this: you are acting out of love. You are honoring your commitment, and that's a wonderful thing to do. Holy crap. That's if you don't both actually want to have sex, don't do it out of obligation. I promise you that's not going to end well.
I wonder if this guy's ever been married. Where he knows what it's like to be in a relationship where one would like to have sex and the one doesn't. Or maybe one's not feeling like it as much as the other. And all sex is a loving thing. It's a very loving and important thing. It's not like, oh, because whatever. Yeah, he is married. Is he okay? How long has he been married? I'm just curious because I wonder what his relationship is like. Man, mind, woman, emotion, the mind. Have you, Corpse, have you watched a lot of his videos?
And what does that say about women in abusive relationships? That whatever, too bad if you don't want to do it. You got to do it because that's how love works. What a horrible message to send to anybody.
That's not true.
Right?
That's obviously there are a few grounds for divorce. I'm sorry for the people who don't think so, but like if you're getting abused, you're able to leave. If someone cheats on you, you're able to leave. That's it. I mean, you can't just like walk out for no reason. I've heard him talk about his family, but I don't know how long. Okay. Is he still married? Is he born? Is he divorced? Is he married? I'll be curious. Like, how is his relationship actually working out?
Absolutely despicable advice. I posted before about a different example where there was a Christian wife who said sex with her husband was painful and unsatisfying for years into her marriage, and that she told her friend that it was like that. And she said, it's probably because I don't have a clitoris. And her friend is like, that is probably not right. And her friend then showed her where the clitoris was by using her newborn baby girl as an example.
This is
and
super
that's
like
very, very disturbing for all the reasons.
It's so unfair though. He's just using such crazy examples. He sounds like if he is married, he oppresses his wife. I mean, I don't know. I can't say that for sure.
Not the least of which is because her husband is a clinical sexologist with a PhD, and apparently he couldn't help her with this.
My to-do list used to scare the out of me. Look, a jumbled mess of client projects, back-to-back.
So, then you get into purity balls, where daddies take their daughters to a dance, and the girls who are prepubescent basically pledge their vaginas to their dad for life until he can hand it off to her future husband. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, has attended a purity ball, and there's video of it. That's creepy. Or there's porn monitoring software so that, you know, your accountability partner knows exactly what you're looking at online.
Okay, this one I totally have a problem with. He's like, yeah, it's totally weird to monitor or make sure that, or try to help someone not to watch porn. That's so terrible. You should watch all the porn because that's so empowering to women. Oh my goodness, that's the worst take you could ever make. Of course, porn is definitely something that is very addicting and it's very difficult to stop, especially if there's a lot of emotional trauma behind it and whatever, you watch it because there's other things that you haven't dealt with in your past. And that's perfectly normal to have accountability partners be like, you should not be watching this. Seriously, like this is not good for you. It's not good for you, and it's not good for your future partner. It's not good for the person that you're watching. That's so demeaning. I'm not saying pornography. I mean, because it's a trigger word for YouTube. So yes. I'm sorry. That's just something that's totally okay to do. And I would advocate for having people to be like, let's help you. Obviously, there's no condemnation as in saying, oh, you're so disgusting. Even though it is disgusting, we should help people because it's a legitimate problem that a lot of men deal with. He's acting like it's completely amazing to just watch pornography and like that's so empowering to women. I'm so glad you think so. That's the worst take from him so far.
Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, does that with his son, which is creepy. So that's
it's not
purity
creepy.
culture for
It's
you.
called like making sure that your kids are not watching demeaning and degrading, disgusting things online. I thought I was talking about the hardcore band. Nah.
It's very disturbing. And again, all the things we have talked about apply to young Christian women. And over the past few years, what we've seen is a lot of those Christian women who were raised in that have spoken out against it. And they've said this is harmful, that it set them up for failure in their
I would like
marriages.
to see all
They are
these
still
women.
Christian, but they feel it was harmful. In fact, in 2018, the guy who wrote a book called I Kiss Dating Goodbye that promoted purity culture, Joshua Harris, he literally apologized for all the shit he had written. This is saying he apologized to the LGBTQ community.
That's because he's an atheist now and he's not a believer, and of course he's gonna apologize. Yeah, there's something like that I saw. Yeah, I mean, he became an atheist, and I agree. There's some things that are a little extreme, okay? Like, you can't hold hands with a girl before you're married. Okay, there's no premarital eye contact. Stuff like that. Okay, I get that. And that could cause a little extremist. I think the guitarist did, yeah. I get that. Or like, you can't date anyone, but you only can court. I've seen stuff like that where, okay, let's chill, but that doesn't mean that Christianity's completely wrong. No premarital speech. Yeah. Like, I grew up in like this type of idea, and I get where some of that is like, but because it's not necessarily biblical, but because they take it to the extreme. But there are a lot of important things that are biblical that will help someone emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. Like saving yourself for marriage, saving yourself for the person that you're supposed to be with, or just only having one sexual partner. How amazing and wonderful that is. Like, on so many different levels, where you don't have to worry about any other past relationship. You don't have to worry about any insecurities that might come up, or jealousy or grudges or pain because of other past traumas or other past relations that someone had. It's difficult. Let's continue.
Because he was anti-gay, but he also apologized to women who were victims of purity culture because he pushed for that. By the way, he wrote that book when he was like 12 or something. What did he know?
He was a teenager, like 16.
There's no nice way to spread those Christian beliefs without falling into these generalizations and sexist tropes and rejecting the idea that sex before marriage can be enjoyable. It can be educational. In a way, it could be empowering to you. And the proponents of purity culture cannot bring themselves to admit that other people have healthy, active sex lives outside of marriage, within a marriage, and that you don't have to be ashamed of it. For them, it's abstinence or death, pretty much. And that is how they frame it, too. If you have sex, only bad things will happen. Like, there are no other options.
That's not true.
And we know this leads to sexual repression, a deeply misogynistic...
The only thing is, it's just called sin, and it's going against what God has called us to do. That's it, really. The Bible says to flee from sexual immorality. No other sin is harmful to your body like sexual sin.
Culture and a church environment in which assault victims can't even trust anyone at their church to tell what happened to them because they will be seen as the instigators. Because the pastor's first comments are always like, well, what were you wearing? So that's purity culture.
That's not ours. That's such a generalization. Yes, sin, Greek for missing the mark. Exactly. Okay, what is the mark? The mark is a man and woman come together in marriage and form a union. That is the mark. And when you miss that mark, it's sin. We fall short of God's glory every day. We fall short of God's glory. Therefore, that's why we need a Savior. Yeah, sounds like whatever church he was a part of was more cult-like. The truth is, we can overcome lust through understanding, and that will repress your sexuality in a good way. You won't experience confusion and delusion. Yeah, I don't even think it's about like repressing your sexuality. It's like, how about just focus on seeking Jesus and doing what Jesus wants you to do, then it's not about. Curious what you meant by that. What do you mean? Curious what I meant by what? Or are you talking about to walk by the Spirit?
So that's the backdrop of this new fascinating paper. And I'll show you the cover here if you want to Google it. Effects of Purity Culture Tropes on White Christian Women's Marital and Sexual Satisfaction. And just to, I don't want to spend forever on this, but the researchers basically explained what we already knew about the harm of purity culture, some of which I've just mentioned to you. And then they set the stage for what happens after marriage. Okay. And that's what has not been explored. And here's what they did. They looked at 6 common tropes of purity culture. First, they talked about gatekeeping. What is the consequence of teaching gatekeeping? Gatekeeping is the belief that guys all want one thing and girls have a responsibility to make sure those guys never stumble. So you better cover yourself up and not flirt. That's gatekeeping. Girls are the gatekeepers. Then there's perpetual lust. The idea that guys are always horny no matter what, and it's a battle for them. And you got to make sure they are not tempted. Then there's soul ties, S-O-U-L, soul ties. This idea that if you have sex with anyone before marriage, you are giving a part of your soul up to somebody else.
I don't know anyone who thinks about soul ties. I vaguely know about that, soul ties. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. But there are some very dangerous things to having multiple sexual partners, though. It's called pair bonding. And every time you have sex with another person and then another person, it's harder for you to pair. Sex between one person will keep you closer and closer, and you have a better, more important relationship where it makes it even harder for you to leave that person because that's the only person that you know. And that's a really good thing, a really healthy thing. So do you blame the car? Okay, but also, here's the thing. It is not a woman's job, 100%. It is not a woman's job to make sure you don't cheat. That is not their job. It's not your wife's job to make sure you don't cheat. That is 100% true. It's up to the man to be able to not even be like thinking about that stuff, first of all. To not even give yourself to temptation or to allow yourself to be in that position to even think about doing something that is within sexual sin. Okay? But it would be very sad if my wife was like, I'm not having sex with you anymore or something, you know? It's just, that's what, it's very, very healthy. Like if you ever go to marriage counseling, I've never had marriage counseling, but I pre-marriage counseling. And like, if you're not having a good sex life, that's a good indicator that people could possibly get divorced. Okay, like that's very important and very healthy for your marriage. Is that from experience or what you have been told? From what?
And that means your future husband's not getting that piece of you. So those are all involving restricting sex, why you can't have sex. Those are 3 beliefs they asked people about. The other beliefs they asked people about were post-marriage, obligation sex, the belief that a wife has to give her husband sex whenever he wants it, her opinion doesn't matter. That's obligation sex. Second one is no divorce, this idea that you are stuck in your marriage even if you're not compatible and you realize your sex life sucks, or there is abuse in the relationship.
Or maybe choose your wife or husband and make sure that is the one for you. Figure it out. I get it. Not everyone's perfect. And we make mistakes and make bad decisions. I get it. And there's mercy and grace for that. But when you're just choosing and deciding you're still in a marriage, fight for that marriage. The multiple partners makes it harder or later to find love. It's harder to pair bond. It's harder for you to actually connect. That is a scientific fact. True. The Bible also does not teach obligation, sex, or no divorce. Yeah, that's not love sharing with your wife.
Like, there are some exceptions to that, but not a lot. So this idea that you have to stay in a marriage even if you're unhappy for sexual reasons. Last one is sexual methadone. And this is the idea that a wife has to give her husband sex frequently, or else it's your fault if he strays. So those all involve coercive sex. This idea that women have to give their husbands sex no matter what. And what the researchers found, and I am summarizing here because they do use a lot of jargon here, but what they found is that women who grew up with purity culture beliefs had higher levels of sexual pain. And what they said is, we found that past belief in purity culture tropes was associated with higher rates of primary sexual pain if you believed in soul ties, obligation sex, and sexual methadone. You had higher rates of sexual pain. All right. They went on to say,
Thing is, most Christians don't believe in any of those things. Obligation sex is, first of all, it should never be like an obligation. Oh my goodness. But he's acting like the wife doesn't like sex. That's what it seems like he's acting like. Like, most women still like sex. No, he's quoting, a study that is probably just on apparently a certain type of people group that is apparently people who have been studying. And then it seems like he's grouping this all into all of Christianity. Or like what actually the Bible teaches.
say that women who dealt with sexual pain were more likely to ditch those beliefs as a result of them. So I guess a silver lining in a way. What about marriage and sexual satisfaction? This is interesting too. They found that women who currently believe in gatekeeping, perpetual lust, and soul ties were less happier in their marriages and had less sexual satisfaction eventually.
Maybe it's because they have that mindset in the first place. But he gets into saying like, well, if they do, it must be because they're delusional, essentially.
Who believed in obligation sex in marriage were also likely to have lower current sexual satisfaction. No surprises there. Interestingly enough, the people who believed in they also said that people who believed you can't get divorced and that you have to give your husband sex whenever he wants, they actually had higher marital satisfaction.
Oh, you don't
So it's possible that if you're in a community that believes that stuff, I think a lot of women have convinced themselves their marriages are wonderful. One, because they have nothing to compare it to, and two, they've never known anything else.
That's the most craziest straw man in the world. Just be like, well, the people who actually do enjoy their marriages and their sexual life, that's because they just don't know any better. That's because they haven't experienced all of the amazing other partners they could possibly have. That's very ridiculous. Like, it's obvious though, like, there's a reason why, if there's just a husband and a wife only have one partner that together. Thank you, Lorenzo. He's like essentially saying that because they don't know any better, that's why they enjoy their relationship. There's nothing wrong with only having one partner. It's even better. It's like saying, why would you want comparison in your life? Comparison never brings someone happiness. Jealousy never wants people, jealousy never makes someone happy. Envy never makes anyone more happy. Like all of those things that having multiple partners will bring is just dissatisfaction because you're always wanting something else or always wondering. That's never a good thing. And he's acting like it is. So yeah. And here are some stats that I've read that here's an analysis data from the National Survey of Family Growth and found that women who married as virgins had the lowest 5-year divorce rates, 11% in the 1980s, decreasing to 6% in the 2000s. Women with only one premarital partner had the record lowest divorce rates. Conversely, women with two premarital partners experienced higher divorce rates, notably 28% in the 1980s. In recent years, those with 10 or more premarital partners have exhibited the highest divorce rates, reaching 33% for marriages in the 2000s. That's crazy. So the more sexual partners you have with someone, the more likely you're going to get divorced. And let's be honest, guys. Divorce is not a fun thing. No one likes divorce. Maybe eventually people might be happy they got divorced, but it's not a fun thing. You lose half of your stuff, not unless you have like a prenup or whatever, but it's not a fun thing. If you have kids, it's just even more disgusting and worse. Probably because those women that save themselves probably also think divorce is wrong. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. What is wrong with thinking divorce is wrong? Obviously. When a husband and wife stay together and they're in a healthy relationship, those kids that they raise are even going to be more healthy. People like to think, we see all the problems with divorced families and fatherless homes. I believe 80% of the people incarcerated who are in jail, especially the men, are because they grew up in a fatherless home. Who didn't have a father around. That's the problem. And being sexual promiscuous it's one of the causes to that. Not necessarily. It's a lot of times also, I can't say that's the only thing, obviously, because there's a lot of deadbeat dads. And I'm going for the same thing, though. What you guys are not realizing, I'm holding this expectation to men and women. Men shouldn't have 10, 20, or even 2 sexual partners. Like, obviously, it's supposed to be together, both husband and wife, both men and women together. That's the problem. He's only talking about women, but what about men? Men should be held to this higher standard. And I think purity culture is supposed to promote men to stay with one partner too.
But you know what the researchers said? Who had better marriages and better sex lives? The women who ditched all these beliefs entirely. And this is fascinating. I'm just going to read this to you. The people who never believed in any of this stuff had higher marital satisfaction for 4 of the 6 things they investigated. Women who no longer believe these things about purity culture had higher sexual satisfaction on average than the people who still believed. Those who never believed it in the past had higher sexual satisfaction than those who still believe it. And of the 6 things I mentioned, the most harmful trope was soul ties, the idea that women become used if they do anything before marriage. If they grow up believing that...
My goodness. What he's not understanding is how men... I feel like everything that he's fighting really helps men actually do use and abuse women to just have multiple sexual partners, and because that's usually what it comes down to. For the most part, men are usually the ones who still sleep with a lot more people than women do. Their average is higher than women. So who's really being used and abused here? Men or women? Women. When you teach this idea that you can have sex with whoever you want and it's great for you, that's really mostly benefiting the man at the end of the day.
The researcher said their bodies may trigger trauma responses when they finally end up having sex, even with someone they love and who they don't believe is a threat. And finally, what the researcher said is if you ditch these beliefs, it's actually good for your health. And I want to show you that right here. Give me 1 second. Yeah, here we go. Let me share this with you here. Boom. Look at this part starting here. Believing misogynistic religious tropes in high school was highly correlated to later developments of primary sexual pain. This suggests that the women who believed in this stuff at an early age and then experienced negative effects were more motivated to change their belief system than those who experienced no negative effects. So that's kind of good news. And the researchers went on to say that if we view sexual pain disorders as a form of complex trauma, what we should do to help these women out is to help them dismiss a lot of these beliefs. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically the more we learn about purity culture, the more we find out how much harm it's done. And whatever religious standards that the pastors and authors were hoping to meet by writing that BS years ago or giving sermons about it, all that we have heard since shows that it wasn't worth the cost to countless women whose lives have been ruined because they believed in that stuff. And if Christians don't have the guts to confront the mess they've created, it's up to the rest of us to call them out on it. Like that pressure from the outside pointing out the weirdness of purity culture, that stuff has helped. And when Christians who lived through it call it out and explain how wrong it is, that stuff helps. And my God, think of the courage young Christian women have to call it out, even when they're in those communities. So kudos to anyone who maybe once wore a silver purity ring and thought sex would be amazing and perfect after their wedding, only to discover that sex, like everything else in a relationship, it requires work. It requires self-awareness and the
Yeah, you don't say. This is what's like doesn't make any sense to me for what he's saying. Obviously, sex takes practice and you have to learn, and the more you do it, the better you get. But with a partner, the same partner that you have sex with, the better you'll get. And it takes practice. So if you're a virgin when you get married, obviously anyone should know, yeah, it's going to be really not amazing in the first time. But the more you have sex, the better you will get. And they even say, though, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm pretty sure it's really low. When women who go sleeping around with multiple different partners, they're a lot less likely to even be satisfied or have a climax or to finish when they're sleeping around with multiple partners. But if they have the same partner, they're more likely to be satisfied. That's what, of course you're going to have to learn. It's important. You need to obviously realize when you have sex, it's between two people and you're coming together and you're supposed to serve one another. It's not about just you. It's about the other person. How can you satisfy the other person? It goes both ways. I would say that's the best way for sexual intimacy. Because I don't agree with this study is probably something that is just something that is based off a very small amount of people who probably had some like bad experience, and he's using this as an illustration to be like, see, religion is all terrible and awful. You see? And the problem is, I guess purity culture, whatever that is not what God has called us to. He called us to be pure. And I know man made up like a culture and added things into what it means to be pure, I guess. But or things that keep you from being pure. And maybe all those things that they think that keeps you from being pure are not okay. That you that they think you need to do. Right. That's the problem.
Understanding that not everybody is compatible. And so these researchers said they don't want Christian women to have to go down a path that is not right for them. The researcher, Joanna Sawatsky, she told me personally when I asked her about this, I think there's this misconception that the problem with purity culture is that people become prudish or don't like sex. What we have found is that for many women, their ability to consent has been systematically chipped away. It's not that they're prudes, it's that they're not able to say no, and so they cannot freely say yes. So to put it another way, if you don't think of your current or future husband as a horny monster who must constantly be fed, and if you don't think of sex as something that must always be suppressed until marriage, at which point it'll immediately be unleashed, you're probably going to have a happier marriage and a healthier sex life. And if you have a happy marriage and a healthier sex life, you're more likely to ditch those purity beliefs that were there in the first place. And so what the researcher told me is that it's long past time for Christian leaders to stop treating sex, and I love the way she said this, they need to stop treating sex as a male need and a female obligation. Focus on...
Okay, I think the moral of the story is he thinks that there's a massive amount of people in this, or Christians, who think like this purity culture. And as again, I grew up, I would say, in that purity culture, being taught very kind of similar things, the same aspects of like the most conservative types of way. And for the most part, I still like agree with the premise or the idea, the reason, not like holding like understanding or like saying that like everything that they say you should do to withhold from having sex or abstain from having sex, you should do all of those things. I'm not saying you can't hold hands or you can't be in a room with a girl until you're married or all that type of things. I'm not saying that, but the reason is good, you know. Yeah, I don't know. I would be interested to see. I just thought it was like so crazy because he's saying like, oh, being pure is not, being pure is bad, essentially. That's what I feel like. And he's taking some extremist situations where I don't know a lot of people like this anymore. And that's not what the Bible teaches. If he's using this as a way to like condemn religion or condemn the Bible, then that's where I say it's not okay. And he's thinking that there are a lot of scientific studies that show like pair bonding does have an effect. Having multiple sexual partners will affect you in the future. There's consequences to everything, okay? I think that's what it really comes down to. You can say whatever you want and think you're happy with whatever you want. Yeah. So I thought this was interesting. I really like this topic a lot. I just don't see a lot of maybe I just haven't gone down the rabbit hole of these type of videos, because I do watch a lot of atheist religion and Christianity and stuff. But I like talking about this, and right. Imagine Islam is the one that actually within the religion, there's a lot of stuff within there that actually have in the Quran corporal punishment for their wives, okay? Maybe he does, I don't know. I think that's funny. But I'm gonna pull up a verse here. Jean, hello. Yeah, I probably did make the video for that law. Why isn't this guy? All right. Okay. Howdy. What's up, Tactical Viking? Were you in here? Did you just get in here? All right. Spirit guided relationship, wives and husbands. This is in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. And further, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Oh, wow. Now everyone's like, how dare you say submit to your husbands? That's terrible. For a husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the savior of his body, the church. As the church submits to Christ, so your wives should submit to your husband in everything. For husbands, this means love your wives as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her to make her holy and clean, washed by cleansing of God's word. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Whoa, my goodness. You have to pick up the cross, carry it, sacrifice yourself. You missed the donuts and coffee. I know this one's been a spicy one, talking about relationships. No, I missed donuts and coffee. Yep. And at the end of the day, I'm sorry, but I know it's not every woman, but women do like the man to lead. They want to be provided for. I know it's not everyone, but a lot of women do like that. They want to take care of their kids at home and, to be with their children. Like any loving mom usually would want that. They would want the opportunity to be with their child and not have to go to work after they just gave birth 6 weeks later or whatever. So what I'm saying is Christianity teaches the right way. In the Bible, the right way, a healthy way, the healthiest way to be in a marriage. And all the other stuff, maybe that people write about, yeah, it's okay. Some of them I was like, huh? But, yeah, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Christianity in the Bible has a right way for a marriage. It's a healthy way. But maybe people write books and they take things out of context maybe and have their opinions. It's not always right. That's not necessarily the Bible. You know? So guys, in the description below, there will be a link for you to click to help you decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I encourage you to do that. That will be the best decision of your entire life. Hello, shalom. All right, we have another amazing videos coming up. Don't forget to like and subscribe according to Tactical Viking. Thank you, Tactical. Okay, guys, I have some pretty exciting news.
Consciousness is an emergent phenomena in the same way that selection is an emergent phenomena when you have chemical bonds.
Correct that looking back, if usually the more of one, the more of the other.
Complexity and, sorry.
Consciousness and complexity.
Well, that's a big leap. No.
400 years. You have a time machine?
That's two different.
Okay, so I'm excited for this one. This is from James Tour, Dr. James Tour. And he is absolutely amazing. And he was in a debate with Dr. Lee Cronin at Harvard Cambridge Faculty Roundtable, The Origin of Life. It was about the origin of life and who created it. Was it just a bunch of accidents forming cells, or was there a creator? And now they're at this roundtable, and this guy asked him, what if you created a time machine to 400 years and you see that they could take cells and proteins and make them and come together, and that they can now create cells and life? Would you still believe in God? And I think it's crazy. And James Tour answers this. And guys, I am reaching out to James Tour and I'm trying to interview him. I think it will be the coolest thing. It'll be like my first ever interview with someone. And he said he would do it. Now we have to figure out a time. So I really hope that it works out. And I'm praying that we'll be able to meet just like a Zoom call. That's the thing I think I can do. And I'm super excited, and I hope it works out, and I'll be able to ask him lots of questions. So maybe if you guys want me to ask him some questions too, I can write it down. But I hope it works out. He said he would, but he just answered me today. We'll see when we can make that happen. I'm hoping to interview him. Yeah, I know. I hope it works out. All right, so let's get into it.
It is. I haven't tried the roast beef yet, so I can't comment.
This is such an interesting
pages and
format.
pages and pages about the taste of something. So it can't be that simple. I think you could probably write roast beef.
Questions about it are not simple.
No, but just a description of the taste. I'm not sure taste is simple.
In Christian, Jewish, and Muslim theology, God is absolutely simple, but the questions about him are unanswered.
Okay, I need to get to this guy answering. I know it's coming up, but it's hard to
400 years. You have a time machine?
Okay, I'll just go to this.
And you meet Lee's great, however many greats, grandchild, who's also working on the emergence of life. And that person tells you that actually you were totally correct, that looking back, you know, the ideas we had about like the chemistry of the emergence of life now were like hopelessly simplistic. You needed all kinds of new ideas. But they also show you their machine where they can, like, you know, at one end, like they pour in whatever, some sugar or whatever simple things you're meant to pour in. And at the other end, you know, the day later you get cells, and they can like take you through, and they can describe the whole process for you. It's like entirely convincing that it could have emerged like this on Earth. Do you feel vindicated, or do you feel like uncomfortable because of your religious views?
Oh, I feel So I didn't inject any religious convictions in my talk.
That's true.
Okay.
But nevertheless, you have some. So.
Oh, I absolutely do, but I just wanted to put that out there. But no, I feel totally vindicated. I feel totally vindicated because I think that there's phenomena that, so the molecules in my mind are fighting against moving toward life. And you really push them, you use all sorts of ingenuity. In Lee's lab, he has all these robots adding in certain orders and certain times and certain chemicals. And you keep pushing them toward it, and it's so hard to have them move toward life. So just recently, just in the last couple of days, Dimitar Suslov here at Harvard has used chiral-induced spin selectivity to help him to get crystallization to enhance chirality in some crystals. This is using this new phenomenon. You see that, hey, maybe there is a route to really enhance chirality through a new phenomenon that wasn't even around when I was in school. So I think there's many new things that we're going to have to learn before we're going to be able to solve this problem, because many smart people have pushed and pushed and pushed on this, and it doesn't seem to have advanced. Not only we're further back because the cell is progressing further away from us at a faster rate. So if somebody can duplicate life, that's great. Just like when Watson and Crick published the genome, the way a genome stores information. That doesn't make God less in my eyes. That makes him all the more magnanimous.
No, that's fine. So just to be clear, at the beginning you said, at the very beginning of your talk, you said that you think we will figure it out.
Yes.
But it was a very brief statement. So just to be clear, so you do believe, like, in the end, there's a naturalistic explanation for the emergence of life?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see, just like I'm using the analogy of the genetic code, where we're going to go, oh, Lord, that's how you did it.
Exactly. That's 100% how I would think too, because I don't think he's lying. I don't think just because you can understand something means that there is no God. Just because you can learn how to create something, that doesn't prove that there wasn't a mind behind who created us in the first place. I think it's still like the opposite, like he's saying. It would prove like, wow, how in the world could you make all of this happen? When we understand the DNA and we see how wonderfully complex it is, we don't know how to necessarily make DNA like that, but we understand it a little bit more. And you see, that's how science got started. It got started because we wanted to know more about God and to understand why things work the way they work, and to help us to get to know how wonderfully complex and amazing God is.
That's how you did it. That's how information is stored in the cell. You know, prior to that, if you were 200 years ago, say you were in 1750, and you asked somebody about genetic code, for them to have said, oh, well, we've pretty much gotten this figured out. You know, if parents are tall, the kid's going to be tall. If they're short, the kid's going to be short. Mm-hmm. Right. That does a disservice to it, to trivialize it in that manner. But we didn't have the tools to really do this. We got crystallography, and we are able to begin to see these things. So I don't think we even have the tools to do this well. But, yeah, that's my answer.
Okay.
Well, then, if molecules don't move towards life by themselves,
yes,
and life somehow evolved from molecules, then the missing X factor must be either natural or supernatural. It must be either the environment or a creator, right?
Could you speak up a little bit?
What?
Could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah. If, as Jim said, molecules do not...
This is such a funny situation. They're all sitting around a table talking with their mouths full of food. John Doe, archaeological doesn't even support Bible stories. That's so not true, and you know that. We find so many archaeological digs that prove that, oh, wait, the Bible's just not mythological stories. They're actual real artifacts that we find today that prove that these things did happen in some way or another. Walk by the Spirit. Thank you so much for giving me that rundown on Aaron and giving me all that information. That was super, super cool. I absolutely loved that. And I'm going to use that. I don't know when I'm going to make that video. I'm hoping to soon because it's going to be very in-depth. It's going to take a long time to edit. But yeah, I appreciate it. That's going to be very helpful. Just like New York proves Spider-Man is real. No. Where is the Ark of Ten Commandments? What about Pontius Pilate? We literally see a stone written under the ruler of Pontius Pilate where Jesus was and met and was condemned to die. Thank you. Yeah, I might, once I really dive deep into it, it might be in January, to be honest, because family stuff is going to be really busy as Christmas is coming around. But yeah, it's a story with a real place. It must be real. Now, that's not true. That's like saying there's no archaeological things. What was I going to say? We literally have writings about David, about someone said that they've defeated the lineage of David. That's proving that the Bible was right, saying that there was actually this person named King David in the Bible, and we have proof of that because there was some significance of that name. Therefore, that would have made King David actually a literal person.
Not spontaneously and by themselves move towards cells. Then, since we know that cells came after molecules, some other force than the molecules themselves must have moved them. Now, that force must be external to molecules, and it must be either outside of molecules in the environment, or it must be some force outside the universe, right?
I mean, I must correct us. We don't know that. Everything on Earth is pretty much touched by biology in some way. We don't know that every planet in the sky around life doesn't emerge eventually. I think we're taking a very parochial view, and I think that I think there are some quite fundamental missing scientific phenomena that we're jutting up against. And I think and it's quite interesting. You can see back in the history of science where this has happened again and again and again. Jim, I don't really know what your agenda is. It's a bit weird because on the one hand you're so angry and aggressive against just the process of normal science, right? It's like you're saying, oh, this is garbage and that's an idiot and that's a loser and they don't know anything. That's the process of science, right? We come up with models, we refute them in a civil way. I think we make more progress by doing it in a civil way. And then we go, oh, I don't know who your audience is. I came here tonight hoping you weren't going to get up there and shout and misquote. And I refuse to get in that conversation. I came here in good faith. What I would say is there's something super interesting what's going on. And the reason why I came here tonight wasn't to address your ludicrous claims, was more to say, hey, let's put our best foot forward for new scientists out there, people who are skeptical, people want to learn more and find where the new interesting problems are in science. Because the framing is a bit wrong. We knew there was lightning, we knew that we could capture electricity, we knew static electricity, we didn't know anything about it. Same when we came to the antibiotic revolution. And there is a lot of cultural artifacts we have to deal with. So I'm kind of puzzled, but you had a question which but I just like to put it out there because what I want to do at the panel interview, I'm only going to take part in the panel interview if we actually really put away our kind of let's just make statements for claims and actually ask, well, what is interesting? What do you find confusing? Where are the new problems? Because we'll build a better community, right? In physics, we got a lot of particle physicists together. They had to work together because it's so expensive to do those experiments, right? But anyway, I will stop there. But I just think there is a more nuanced. We should criticize. Absolutely, you're right to say no. I don't accept that. That doesn't pass my test scientifically. But if you do it in a way that doesn't make people scared to engage, why do you think none of those people engage with you? They didn't engage with you because you were. It sounded looked like the rantings of a person that we're not wanting to have a discussion. And I know you a little bit. I know some of the chemistry you do. It's great. So I came here to kind of de-amplify that and have a more nuanced conversation.
Well, I think we want to know. I'm kind of interested in what you're doing in your lab toward this problem, and why you think these people, many of whom I know, are scam artists, because I'm pretty sure they're not.
Yeah.
And I think they're real scientists and very good scientists. I don't know about Lee, but I don't know him, but I'm interested in what you want to happen.
So I don't think that anybody is setting out to scam anybody. I don't think that anybody's out to intentionally scamming people. I think that what happens is when you say that we'll have life in the lab in 3 years, when we have life in the lab of 5 years, that's a disservice to the field. When on the other side you get into a professional meeting and you say, I can't even make the RNA. And there's a long distance between the RNA and life.
You're a scientist, right? You know that I may say I'm going to find the top quark in 10 years and it took me 27. I mean, it doesn't mean that I'm lying or scamming or it's not a disservice. So
well, okay, but if they're using that to prove a point and they don't know, that is being a disservice. That's saying something that actually isn't reality. You don't know for a fact that's going to happen. So you can't use that to argue. That's what he's getting a problem with. We'll see it.
Not as a service.
In nanotechnology, Jim, where you've made claims.
All right, thanks, Seth. Bye, Muppet. Appreciate you guys.
About what you're going to do in your lab, and you haven't done those. You know, you have produced patents. Arguably, they've gone somewhere, but you haven't done the things you said you were going to do. Does that make you working in bad faith?
Yeah. So you're making all good points, Lee. What I think is that you're coming around, like in the interview that I read from Lex Fridman, and I read a long paragraph, and you said even more that I think is really quite accurate. When you start saying, okay, I make a molecule, I make another molecule, I make another molecule, and then what? We just keep making molecules. This is exactly what I have been saying from the people, from the groups that are doing these synthetic things.
I was to say, but science is about disagreement. I'm not saying all the Origin Life community are in agreement. They are disagreeing, but that is the process of science. You're kind of trying to say that's something else. I think that's relatively inaccurate. It's fine to, in fact, we only make progress by disagreeing, right? I would say some people, when they're doing, so they have a certain set of things they do, they're putting in constraints. I want to understand where those constraints come from. That doesn't mean what they're doing is wrong. It just means I have a different viewpoint.
Okay, so
I don't mind saying that as a layman who's not a scientist, it's helpful when I hear Jim describe how we didn't know that we needed to know something that we found out just recently. In other words, a lot of things we don't know about how to detect how life would have begun, that the goalpost is actually farther than we thought. I think that's a phrase I don't mind repeating from Jim.
I think that's
when we discover that the goalpost is really a lot farther than we thought.
I think that's not evidence
to the general public, as opposed to I know.
I think that's what Jim or James is trying to get at, though. He's trying to show, like, these claims that you're making. Oh, we know exactly how to make this molecule and create life is far-fetched, and they're using that to say, like, oh, see, there's no God.
No, it's just a second. As opposed to we're getting closer, it seems like we're getting farther away. It is so much farther away than we thought. Go ahead, Dina.
Yeah. So I think the clue is
I'm
Jim's.
having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah. So I think the clue is Jim's statement that says like the public is being misled. And what do you think about that? I mean, like, what is at stake about the communications of the origins of life? Because I got complaints as well from scientists that so many hype about the origins of life, and it seems like every research coming out, it is the answers of the origins of life, and it seems that you have problem with that. And what is at stake?
So I gave you these statistics of the general public, how grossly wrong they are. So we as a community have put forward something that is grossly incorrect, information that is grossly incorrect, that is starting in textbooks from the elementary school level, and the primordial soup model is taught not just into college, but into advanced college classes, that model. So things are not nearly as comfortable as you might think. And so I think we do a disservice to students if we start saying that this is how life came about, when there's no indication that life has come about this way.
There are textbooks on molecular transistors that you have built and conjectured that they never worked. So should we take those ideas out of the textbook? Science is about putting out models that then get replaced with better models after we look at the fundamental problems, so we have better explanations. No one has said the primordial model is the way it happened. It is well grounded. There are many things in textbooks, molecular electronics, nanotechnology, that have not come to pass.
Yeah, but when you're teaching something that is saying there is no God, we are created from nothing, then that becomes a problem.
Obviously.
No. I was just wanted to say.
You were frustrated here and here.
The big dig was a.
Dave, I'm conscious there's a question here as well. You had one a few minutes ago.
What would you put in the high school textbook
He wants to ask.
on this topic?
Now, actually, it's been long enough, so now I have two questions. But the first one has to do with the introduction of this notion of selection and selective processes into physics and chemistry. I just finished reading about Hawking's last theoretical work, and it's interesting that he and his collaborators concluded that the best model they could come up with that looked like it was going in the right direction, which is called top-down quantum cosmology, essentially recognizes that there are selective processes, that diagram that you showed there is not just random stuff, but at any given moment in time, there are forces that select for certain outcomes, certain directions, as opposed to others, which means that, in a sense, biology, physics and chemistry, cosmology, is importing this notion of selection.
I didn't have time to put it in 20 minutes, but everything you see is a product of selection. Right. So there's 4 possible universes. There's a combinatorial universe where just everything is just, right? Just a mess. Everything, the big numbers you talk about come. There is the physics universe where you apply the laws of quantum mechanics and whatever, maybe string theory, but let's stick with quantum mechanics, and you have building blocks. There's no contingency. This is like the block universe where everything is accessible simultaneously, why computationists like it and eternalists like it. Then there is when you have contingency in the universe, when you actually allow memories to be basically embedded, and then there's what you observe. And all I'm pointing out is we do not observe a combinatorial universe. We do not observe a combinatorial universe with physics. We observe contingency because we don't see combinatorial explosions. Everything on planet Earth that's been through biology is a product of selection, be it this glass, me, the silverware, and its selection, it requires the following things. Random events happen, and the thing doesn't persist in time. It is erased, it dies. Anything that can exist in time has to be copied in some way, whether it's a meme or a piece of RNA or the photographs on your thumb drive to keep them in play. That is something very critical that we're not seeing that goes through chemistry.
And actually, thermodynamics actually favors this, because everybody talks about equilibrium thermodynamics. That's the theory we're all taught, and not about Prigozhin's work and non-equilibrium thermodynamics, which says simply that if you have enough species to start with, chemical species, you're sufficiently far from equilibrium, which describes pretty much all of the universe that we know, and you continue to import free energy, like this planet, or then it is inevitable that ever more complicated regimes evolve.
I mean,
and this is mathematics. It's been proven, and it's been verified at the simple chemical level with various kinds of reactions that simply do that, set up that experiment. So that to me says life is inevitable. Just wait long enough, because we started.
That is, I'm sorry, obviously I don't know everything, but to say just wait long enough and then you'll see, but we have to wait. Okay, that's literally just as bad as the God of the Gaps. Just wait millions of years. You'll see eventually you'll understand it. Eventually things will adapt. Eventually, just wait long enough. So their explanation is the time gap instead of the God of the Gap. I don't think that's as good either. Shows that he's already being dishonest.
Freeland in my paper did explicitly.
Raphael says, the fact that the youngest man at the table previously said science is about disagreement shows that he is already being dishonest. Science is about facts, not disagreement.
The thermodynamics of it, favors metastable states, not the stability that you guys are looking for, but metastable states that have a differing lifetime. And this is key. So it's all selection.
Well, nothing lasts, ultimately.
And
the same is true for any individual life or for life itself.
And it goes way back before the cell ever became. So life started way back.
I don't know how you can argue for this, the both of you, but I also don't know how I can argue against it. I asked Peter, can you blow a hole in this, please? The idea that there's going to be expected lack of chaos, that things are going to get more complex.
You take the local view of non-equilibrium, or you take the global view that says the universe is.
Either one.
They're different answers.
In just 2 minutes.
Lee's got it.
It's like the invention of zero. Once you see it, you can never let it go. So existence is something that's really special. Objects that exist in time are not random because they have two lifetimes. So when an object is produced, it can either just decay back over a certain lifetime, right, and it's just gone, or it has some causal consequence in the future, which allows itself to be replicated. It could be a molecule or some other, and it keeps going in time. So
that's not an either or, because dying is a causal consequence.
But it has no causal consequence in the future because the information is dissipated back. This is super important. It's super subtle.
How can anything not make a difference in the
future? Let me finish. This works in the laboratory. It works mathematically. It works in Prigoghine's models. Let me say again, you have some noise. Just say some noise. And that noise can somehow, so you have this environment. The environment is killing the noise. So there are three things here. The environment, noise, and a thing. This thing, the object, persists for some time. It has several options. It could decay back into noise and therefore have no consequences, just noise again, low complexity. Or it can go above the threshold and act on the resource, the noise, and pump that noise into more stuff. And as that keeps going, you know what happens in the end? And this is how the first molecules and first molecular networks complexified in a gigantic mess. Because the mess wasn't a mess. The mess was moving towards existence, because the mess that Jim talks about, he doesn't look at over a long enough timescale.
And this is all necessary and deterministic. There's no contingency.
So the contingency emerges with selection in the environment.
Yeah. Right.
not before.
I want to see if James Tour answers here.
It's
That's
kind
a clear
of cool.
threshold.
Yeah, in existence is the proof.
Right.
You know, you can see it all the time.
You've got it.
We embody, in a sense, and this was one of Hawking's arguments, we, meaning the universe around us, embodies the entire history of what led up to that. It's the part that survived.
That's right.
The rest, the random stuff, the thing that dissipated, isn't there.
But wait until we do an experiment that shows it, right? That's what I'm excited about, because now we understand, right? And again, another reason I came, take it in good faith, big problems, let's come up with big ideas, have them open, everyone can poke at them, and then we do something new and our ideas shift, right? And you know, what's the worst that can happen? It's all, well, I mean, I wouldn't call it garbage. That's nonsense, not quite correct, not the best, whatever you want to say. But we move those experiments further. You know, I don't know what's going on here, but I read a lot of David Deutsch, who I think is really at the right interface here. A lot about what Galileo did, and I'm no Galileo, but I do think that there are segments in society that want to cause the God of the gaps. And I'm sorry, Jim, I actually think you're just trying, there's a God in the gaps. I've looked at it very clearly. You say on one hand, I accept it's going to be solved. And on the other hand, you so vociferously make arguments about, hey, I hate the way science works, when you do that yourself in your own science, be it nanotransistors, new conductors, new catalysts. So you kind of move the goalposts. And I disagree that the problem is getting bigger and the goalposts are moving in the past. That's not what's happening. That is, Jim is very, very nicely playing a sleight of hand here by saying and this and this and this, missing the key shift that has to happen in the discipline.
But the other thing about science and technology is, quite frankly, we have a long history of predicting things as being closer than they are. Fusion electric production has been just around the corner 10 years from now for the last 50 years. And so the fact that that's the case, that nothing like you want to see to be convincing has happened in the last 70 years is like no cause for concern. I mean, how long did it take us to figure out the structure of the atom and then to discover that we were wrong?
Well, I would say even more than that. I mean, just the length of time during which, like, our civilization has had the idea that you could deduce things through radical thought is only a few hundred years. It's actually shocking we've managed to get as far as we have.
Yeah.
So,
what would happen? What holes would be blown? What serious holes would be blown in this theory if we discovered a couple hundred years from now with space probes that life existed only on this planet?
Only on what?
Only on this planet.
How could we discover that? There was no way.
You can't discover it.
Oh man, what a crazy argument. I kind of loved it though. I really like it. So they're saying, how could we discover that? There's no way. That's like saying the same question would they bring to God. How are we supposed to show you 100% proof? Can't show 100% proof to anything. That's super interesting. Well, guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I'll be able to interview James Tour. I'm excited. I want to talk to him about creation, the origin of life. I want to talk to him about like different topics that even Christians deal with when it comes to how old the earth is and his thoughts on that, and young earth versus old earth. Even just like, I want to ask him thoughts on like flat earth. Like why do people, I think that would be funny just to talk to someone who's smart. I think that would be cool. Yeah, super fun stuff. That was a long video. Why does it look like cutscene from a movie? I know, right? I liked it. I liked it. Oh man, let's see. How's everyone's day going? It's 5 days until Christmas, or no, 6 days until Christmas. What's everyone's plans for Christmas? I believe Jesus was real. If I met Jesus, he would still need to show the God thing to be true. What if you already met Jesus and you missed him? That's a good question. Yes, I know he truly wants to know him. He just shows really because of Christ. Yeah, I know you're gonna go to church. Nice. I'm gonna go to church not on Christmas Day, but on Sunday. I found God, Jesus' resurrection, flat earth 3 years ago. Lol. I was diehard agnostic. I swore the Bible was full of nonsense. 900 years old people, giants, angels. I thought it was all a joke. Sleep. That's the fault for not saying hi. That's his fault for not saying hi. Maybe he did and you ignored it. Read the Bible more. I encourage you to read the Bible more. Just read the Gospels. Maybe you have read the other Bible. I don't know. But still, read it again. Oh my. As if he has sent you a person and rejected the person's messenger. Read it again. Read the Bible again. Pray to God. See what happens.
Reason podcast, a philosophy platform design.
Don't pray like for things. Okay, like we don't know what God's will is. That's like being very, very demanding, like a spoiled brat to ask for things. Like. No, you could pray for things, but like to expect you have to give them to me or else I won't believe in you. You know? That's something that I wouldn't say to do. But really just seek him. Pray to him. Ask God to reveal himself to you. Just do it every day randomly. And you know, you don't even have to like do anything different. Ask God to reveal himself to you. See what happens. Do it every day for 6 months. All right. So, Alex O'Connor and Ben Shapiro have the debate, is religion good for society? So make sure to watch to the end because I have a Bible verse at the end that will tie all of this together. Let's get right into it.
Experts across multiple continents and whose online video material has been viewed more than 7 delusion. Ben, could you sort of concisely, if you can, talk about what you mean by the atheist delusion?
Sure. So I should start off by saying I don't actually think that it's possible to prove the existence of God. I'm also not a believer that you can disprove the existence of God. I don't think that logical argumentation is going to get you there one way or another, and so I'm not going to try and do that with Alex today, because I think that if people would have been able to provide dispositive proofs, then people would believe them, and if people were able to provide dispositive proofs that God does not exist, then people would be more apt to believe those as well. What I think is an atheist delusion is that it is possible to live ideologically purely in a way that does not rely on fundamental faith principles. When I say faith principles, I'm not going to make the claim that those faith principles are direct from Sinai or that those faith principles require the New Testament, for example. I'm going to make the claim that there are a bunch of principles upon which we base ourselves that are external to what we know about nature and evolutionary biology, and that many of the things that Alex does in his daily life, for example, are going to be things that rely on principles that are external to a philosophy that would assume a lack of the supernatural, a lack of the extra natural. So some of those principles, for example, are free will. So every day we get up, we believe, virtually all of us, whether we say we believe it or not, we actually act in ways that betray the idea that we believe that we have control over our own actions, at least to a certain extent, and that control makes a difference in the world. And that's what gives us purpose. It's what allows us to wake up in the morning and make the decision to do what we believe is right or what we believe is wrong. That the principles of right and wrong are external to evolutionary biology. So both of these principles that I've mentioned already, free will, right and wrong, these come from a language that is external to the Darwinian language of evolutionary biology. If you're talking about free will, there is nothing in nature that suggests the ability to make a decision free of environment and genetics in combination in some sort. The same thing is true of right and wrong, the idea that there is a right and there is a moral wrong that we can reason our way to. Another principle that I think that you're obviously very big on, it's something that you rely on all the time, your entire podcast is based on the idea of reason. These ideas do not exist in the context of a purely materialist atheist universe. Now, I'm not going to make the claim that I can prove that it's God who's behind those things, because one of the principles of faith belief is that I don't understand God. So for people who don't believe in God, that's an easy way out, right? That's an easy way out for people like me, because I say, well, I don't have to explain the relationship between God and free will, because frankly, I don't fully understand God. But that's not really that's not really an open window. That's just part of pretty much all faith systems, is that if my mind were the mind of God, then I would either be God or God would not exist, one of the two things. So the idea that reason makes a difference in our lives, that we can reason our way to propositions, and that's more than just saying a few magic words and that's setting off a few neurons in somebody else's brain in a naturalistic way, that there actually is principles of truth, another concept that comes from the extra natural world, that these principles exist. So far I've mentioned free will, good, right and wrong, reason, and truth, right? All things that we consider extremely key in our daily lives, and that Alex considers key in what he does. It's, I assume, why you get up every morning, or at least why you feel you get up every morning. You know, what gets you up to do your podcast? It's because you want to say things that you believe are reasonable, are going to convince people to act in a better way, or I assume not a worse way, that get people to change their lives in some way, in a self-motivated fashion. That's not merely in a sort of Pavlovian response to circumstance and environment. So if I were going to talk about the atheist delusion, that's what I would suggest is the delusion, that an atheist can use terminology that is drawn from a world that is external to atheism.
That's crazy.
For its.
So, at the end of the day, atheists, if there is no God and it's just people evolving from the natural order, from nothing, then there actually is no free will. You're literally making decisions just based off of your chemicals and your reactions to those responses. Nothing is meaningful or spiritual.
Self. And again, that's not an argument for God even. That's just an argument against atheism. Again, I think the arguments against God are fairly compelling, and I think the arguments against atheism are fairly compelling. This is one of the things that I've said to Sam Harris. And I think that the difference is that most people who believe in God have expressed doubts, and a lot of people who are atheists tend to be more religious in this way than many of the people who are God believers.
Well, something's certain. We don't do cold opens or soft starts here on The Big Conversation. Alex?
Well, I am glad to begin on a point of agreement with you, Ben, that yes, if there is no God, there is no free will, but I think that's
that's what's crazy. I knew he believes that. He doesn't believe in free will. Just see how, like, sad that is.
Of the truth of the latter of those statements, that I suppose the biggest criticism that I made of you in a video response that I made to the atheist delusion, and this show does seem to have an extraordinary capacity for putting me face to face with people that I've been talking smack about online. So thanks again.
By the way, I should say it's a great video, and everybody should watch it if they haven't.
Well, I'm going to put that in the description. I think that glowing endorsement. The principal disagreement that I think I had with you, Ben, is that there was a subtle or not so subtle implication in my view that yes, with no God there's no free will, but somehow having God can solve this problem. I mean, you said a moment ago that you don't think you can establish God's existence through reason alone, but assuming that you do believe in the existence of free will, you think it's a real thing that you have.
Yes.
And simultaneously saying that if there is no God, then free will makes no sense.
Yes.
That does read to me like an argument for God's existence, such that in order to either say that there is free will, in order to say that there is free will, one must believe in God. And that does strike me as an argument for God's existence.
I mean, to slightly curve that, or to kind of sand off the rough edges there, I would say that the argument I made is an argument for something extra natural.
Sure.
Now, you can call that God or not God, but the thing that I'm making the argument for is that you cannot get from a materialist Darwinist universe to free will. That is not possible. So I know that the way you solve that is that you say that there is no free will.
That's right.
And what I'm saying to you is you don't act that way.
I hear this all the time. People say, look, you may say there's no free will, but you don't act as though that's the case. I suppose that I'm just confused as to what it would look like for somebody to act as if they believe there was no free will. I mean, the very argument that there is no free will that I subscribe to, at least one of the various forms that it takes, is a sort of Schopenhauerian view that you can do as you will, you just can't will what you will. And that you are essentially just a biological machine reacting to its internal and evolutionary drives. That's what's happening. Now, call that nihilistic if you like, that's a separate question, but as to the question of how this would make one act, the idea that this might cause us to sort of lay around in bed all day or something, the very mechanism that I think is responsible for eliminating the possibility of free will, that is, the drives that make people do what they do, like I say, do exactly that. Make people do what they do. They make them get out of bed in the morning. Why do you get out of bed and go and make your breakfast?
Okay, then what's wrong with the people who don't get out of bed because they're depressed or lazy and don't have any drive to do anything? Is because they're faulty. They're faulty in their mechanics, their biomechanics. They're faulty, and therefore that's why? Or is it because they just don't want to? They're just lazy.
If there's no free will. So you go and get breakfast because there's no free will and something is driving you to do that that's outside of your control.
For sure. So to get back to the nihilism point, which you kind of put aside, so that means that this conversation is essentially worthless in any sort of real sense. I mean, effectively, we were driven here by evolutionary biology and environment to have this conversation. Everybody who's watching this is driven by evolutionary biology and environment to have a particular reaction to that thing, and ever round the cycle goes. That seems like a very purposeless life. Maybe again, I'm drawing from a realm that is not evolutionarily biologically connected. The word purpose is really, teleology obviously has been taken out of the realm of science pretty thoroughly by atheists and by many people in the sciences, although I would argue that, again, most scientists speak in the realm of teleology literally all the time, and they're borrowing language from the language of teleology, even when they're describing functions of particular body parts, right? The heart pumps blood in order to keep you alive, right? They're constantly using language that's teleological in nature. The real question that I have, and this is what goes to the question that you were asking at the beginning, before the sort of pre-question question, which was the good of religion to society. One of those goods is people believing that their free will matters, and this actually is a useful thing. So I believe that it is deeply important for people in society to believe that they have the capacity to change themselves and to make different decisions than what biology would drive them to do. So you say, well, it's biology that drives you to get out of bed in the morning, which is almost Calvinist in sort of the way that it's described, right? It's like you're predestined to get out of bed in the morning, so thus you get out of bed in the morning. But the reality is that we are constantly making decisions as though those decisions make a difference in the universe. And what social science actually does tend to show is that when people believe that they have control over their own actions, then when they believe that they're capable of changing the way that they live, they do make those changes with more alacrity and in better directions than if they don't believe that. If people tend to believe in a deterministic universe, they do act worse. So it may work. This is going to be sort of Straussian in its implications, but that may work for you. You're a very high IQ individual who can somehow reconcile the idea of living a very purposeful life with the idea that actually there's no purpose to anything. But for the vast majority of people, that is not actually how they live.
Yep.
And I would suggest that even in your daily life, you don't get out of bed in the morning thinking, man, my biology is driving me this morning to get on the bike, have a great day, the sun is shining. That's my biology doing this. And I don't think that most people who live purposeful lives, even if they believe that everything they're doing is predetermined by the world around them, by their own biology, I don't believe they actually feel that. They have to engage in what they themselves would term an illusion in order to feel a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives.
Of course, but that's what...
Before Alex finishes, I just really appreciate this conversation because it shows what an actual atheist should think and how they should live their life is by thinking that nothing is meaningful and nothing has purpose and everything is just happenstance, circumstance, randomness, and it's sad when you really be honest with your intellectual thought. It's sad.
What the evolutionary process, in my view, in my worldview, I should say, has done so well is provide precisely that illusion. I mean, it's not as that, I mean, you say, look, you don't get out of bed in the morning thinking, gosh, you know, look at my biological
My neurons are
drive.
firing, yeah.
Of course not, because if I did, then the whole evolutionary purpose that this illusion serves would fall away. I mean, you say that this is a fairly purposeless life, and perhaps you know, the implication is that it's a bit of a depressing one. I didn't come here to inspire optimism in people. I just think it is in fact the case.
By the way.
It is in fact the case that free will doesn't exist, and we may feel very nihilistic towards that, but as a wise man once said, facts don't care about your feelings. And I will say that the argument against free will, in my view, is based upon something broader than just scientific analysis or empirical research. Rather, we can build an argument, I think, from a law of logic, the proposition that P must either be true or false, and it can't be both, it can't be neither. It has to be one or the other. Now, this law of the excluded middle, one of the foundational precepts of philosophy, we can simply ask a question of any kind of mental activity, and this will be regardless of whether it's material or immaterial. That's what makes this a crucial argument, and an important one, a pertinent one, is that you can ask of that mental activity, is it determined or is it not? That is it determined by anything else, or is it completely undetermined by anything? If it's undetermined by anything, then it's random, and you're by definition not in control of that which is random. If it's determined by something, then it's either determined by something further inside your mind, or inside your brain, or indeed inside your soul, or it's determined by something external to your brain. If it's determined by something...
So, Corp says, it's only sad if you need God to give you worth. I find that a sad life. Well, I think it's just the opposite, because I've heard people say, I give my self-worth by the things that I do. Let's be honest here, guys. Anyone who gives them self-worth by the things that they do will a lot of times feel very worthless inside, because at the end of the day, sometimes they don't do very worthful things. Tell that to someone who's depressed, who doesn't believe in God, or tell that to someone who's just like, I have no meaning, I have no purpose, I haven't done anything in my life to give me purpose. What are you going to say to them then? What are you going to say to them? Oh, you have purpose because your biochemicals are working inside you to make sure that you live. Huh? What's more life-giving than saying you have value because God loves you? He created you in His image. He's longing to have a relationship with you. The creator of the universe cares for you. He cares for you. Out of all the billions of people, He still cares for you, and He knows you by name. Wow. That is so profound. I don't know what in the world that could give more purpose than knowing that God has given you purpose or worth.
Something external to yourself. I should say yourself rather than your brain here, to rid this conversation of any implicit materialism. Exterior to yourself. If that's what's determining the action, then clearly you're not in ultimate control of that action. If it's something inside of yourself somewhere, then all you do is push the problem back, and you ask the question again, is that thing determined or is it indeterminate? So indeterminate, it's random. Determined, you keep going back until you either terminate in something outside of the self, something, or I suppose something undetermined and therefore random, either of which you are completely out of control in. If you say that it terminates in something like a soul, people like to do this. They say, well, look, with a religious philosophy, we have the benefit of introducing a soul. That doesn't solve anything. Because you still need to, it's not a matter of having to explain the mechanism by which the soul brings about actions. That may well be a mystery. But if it is the case that whatever it is that's doing that, is either determined or it's not. And that if it's not, it's random and therefore out of your control. And that if it is, it ultimately terminates in something outside of yourself or something random, and both of which are out of your control. Free will cannot exist.
Well,
and so I would be
that
careful.
argument does rely on the complete deconstruction of the self. Right? I mean, you're using the term self in this argument in, I think, a couple of different ways. You're saying something outside yourself, but then you're breaking down the self into a bunch of separate components as though the self is a computer. Right? As though if you took the self and you broke it down into a machine, and there's like the microchip, and you've got the processor, you've got all these different parts of it. So it has to be coming from here, or it has to be coming from here. But I think the very idea that we have of ourselves as selves is as a deciding being. And so the attempt to carve that down into, so which parts of the deciding being, that is an avoidance strategy. So I don't think that the argument quite holds.
Well, if we can call the self just a deciding being,
call it a deciding being,
then that sort of fundamental assumption that we make about the nature of the self, I don't think is going to be incompatible with atheism.
The Chevy Silverado and an available off-road C71.
How so?
Because we're talking about what the self is here. I mean, atheists believe in the self. Everybody believes in the self.
Well, no, that's not. I mean, that I find difficult to believe. Why would an atheist believe in the self? The self is a series of non-deciding mechanisms, as you've described. I see that your view of the self is an atheist view of the self, a meatball wandering through space, as I've put it somewhat colorfully. The sort of Spinoza idea that you're a stone that's been thrown, and you can comprehend that you've been thrown, but you're a stone that's been thrown, and that's just the way that it is. Why would there be in atheist philosophy such a thing as a deciding self? The deciding self, the deciding being, is external to the idea of an evolutionary cause, because the very word deciding suggests uncaused decision making, and you've just excluded it through your own philosophy.
Uncaused decision making, I suppose, is a concept that I think is unintelligible, and therefore, if there is an unintelligibility of the self on atheism, I suppose the thrust of the criticism that I made to essentially every point you made in that video, except for the argument from motion, is that what you're saying to me, if it applies to atheism, I think simultaneously applies to theism as well.
How so?
An uncaused decision. I mean, what is the process by which a decision is made?
But now you're falling into the same sort of argument that I excluded at the beginning, which was, I said that the beauty of religion is that there's a bunch of stuff I don't understand. So I can't explain to you how the uncaused self makes decisions.
Well, then I can't explain to you how the uncaused self exists on an atheistic
But you have
framework.
a burden and I don't. Meaning that
I don't think that's the case.
You do, though. I mean, the simple fact is that you are the one who's claiming that a reasonable materialist universe is the cause of all. And so if that's the case, you do have to explain the mechanism in a way that I certainly do not. My entire philosophy rests on the positing of an entire realm of things I don't understand in terms of their interaction with the world. Now, as I said at the very beginning, that leaves me a giant escape hatch. I'm not going to pretend that that's not a giant escape hatch. It acts in practice as a giant escape hatch. It also tends to act as a fundamental principle of faith, right? Again, in every moral realm, right? When you get to the problem of good and evil, right? One of the big questions is, well, how can God allow evil to take place in the world? And the fundamental religious answer, as it has been for thousands of years, is my mind is not God's, which is a giant escape hatch. It also happens to be true from a religious point of view.
So if I may, that there are two sort of escape hatches here. There are two appeals to mystery going on here. And it seems to me that what you're saying is something along the lines of my simple appeal to mystery here is disallowed in the way that you're allowed to appeal to this mystery because I'm the one making the claim. I think that not
because I'm the one making the claim, but because
I'm the one with the burden. In the context of this discussion,
sorry, I'm missing the who's the you and who's the I in
yes.
a sense, but yes.
I see what you mean. I'm speaking for myself there.
Sorry.
If in the context of this discussion, this began the subject which I think is the first one you bring up in this video, free will. Here's this thing that I think exists, and on the basis of its existence, think entails the existence of a God, or at least points to the existence of a God. I shouldn't say entail. And then when I say that I don't think that the concept of free will is intelligible, and you say, well, how is it intelligible on atheism? And I say, I'm not sure it is, but it's not on theism either. And you say, well, there's my escape hatch. I can appeal to mystery. I don't think the burden is on me there. I think you were the one who's making the claim that free will does exist, that there is this mysterious property of the universe that escapes this determined or indetermined dichotomy. And then when I say that this is unintelligible to me, and based on what I see to be fundamentally appeal to a law of logic, suddenly I'm the one making the claim. I'm the one with the burden who has to do the proving.
No, the actual claim that I originally made, if you recall, was a conditional claim. I did not claim free will exists, therefore God. I claimed if you believe free will exists, it cannot exist in a materialist universe. Now, you say, okay, fine, it doesn't exist in a materialist universe. I don't believe in free will.
Yes.
That's fine. That's totally plausible. As I said right at the top here, I'm not going to prove to you that God exists today. What I am going to say is that the vast majority of people throughout nearly all of human history have believed there is a thing called a self. It is a deciding self that makes these decisions. If you are a person who believes that, you're right. It can't exist in your world. So I'm not saying that it does exist. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're totally right, and all of this is just a series of chemical firings. That's quite plausible. That's fine. What I have said, and this is the argument that hasn't yet been rebutted, is that society does require an extraordinary number of people to believe that they are capable of making decisions for the good or for the bad. Because, again, not everybody is you. Not everybody is capable of waking up in the morning, putting one half of their brain on hold, the side that says, what I'm doing today doesn't matter, and we are all going to wind up in the cosmic nothingness of space anyway, and the sun's going to explode and eat the Earth. Most people don't function that way. And so a functional society, a society that actually works, relies on people actually believing that their fate is in their hands. And the way that people tend to understand that on a day-to-day level is, I get up in the morning and I make a decision whether I'm taking my kids to school today. I get up in the morning and I decide whether I'm giving charity today. I get up in the morning and I decide whether to go to a job today. Because the truth is that for a huge number of people, and I would say this is true for not virtually all, many, 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 I would say the majority of people, if they were informed since the time they were small that their decision-making process does not exist, there is no decision to be made. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Those decisions have no moral weight in the universe because the universe has no moral weight. There is no way to create a functional society on the basis of these premises.
Boom! That is absolutely true, and I think he just won right there. Even if there is no God, it's super dangerous and sad, and he's right. And that's what every atheist should think and believe according to their logical mindset. It's dangerous and it's sad, it's depressing, but with God, there's so much meaning, there's so much purpose, and you have a reason to be here, and every choice that you make has a consequence, for good or for bad. God made Adam and Eve immortal, and there was no evil. God also made angels, and a few of them rebelled and came to interbreed with humans, corrupting our nature. Initially, we were not supposed to sin. But Adam and Eve sinned. That's crazy. John 1 John 3:19 says, our actions will show that we belong to the truth, so we will be confident when we stand before God. So our actions do matter. What we do does matter, and it makes a difference in the world. So guys, I encourage you to go to Jesus today. Make him your Lord and Savior over your life. It will be the best decision of your entire life. Guys, it is the best thing you could ever do. You have purpose, you have reason, you have a reason to live, and it's not just because you have biochemicals making you think that you have a reason to live. You have a reason to live because God made you and you are in his image. You have purpose to have a relationship with him. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Love and appreciate you all. What a fun video. Yeah, be praying for me. I'll be praying for you. Prolop. Is that your name, Prolop? I'll be praying for you that God will give you purpose and reason and that you will know that he loves you. So I'm going to pray for you all right now. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for everyone watching today. I pray that you will lead and guide them, help them to know that they're loved by you, God. I pray that you will bless them and keep them safe. God, I pray that you will let them know that they have so much purpose, and that purpose is in you. You have created them in their image, God, and you have sent your one and only Son, Jesus, to die on the cross for their sins because we missed the mark. We've sinned. We've fallen short of God's glory. But you, by grace through faith, can save us if we just allow you to do that. So help us to receive your gift and really trust in you and rely on you every day. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys. Love and appreciate you. Bye, Corpse. Bye, Tactical Viking. Bye, Walk by the Spirit. Bye, everyone else watching. Love and appreciate you all. It's time to go. Oh, my back hurts.